Hey y'all, it's good to be here. I'm mindful of the company I'm in. I see fellow electeds, I see fellow leaders, I see people who've been here a lot longer than me. So if I speak too short or too long, I beg your indulgence. A buddy of mine's doing an English class project with his students, and they had the author of the book like zoom in. And his piece of advice for the kids when you're writing is, the first sentence of a book should leave the reader asking a few questions. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do today. If I give too much or too little information for you, that's probably what's going to happen. You can always find out more from sources. We put some handouts on the table that have a lot of details that I guarantee we all could learn something from. If you're interested, take a grab. I'd like to thank all the staff who came. Jackie, who set things up here. Abigail introduced many of her staff. These are the folks who are doing it day in, day out. I'm the chair of the board. I get paid $100 a month to do this job. So the first visual aid is my day job lanyard that I'm wearing, because this is not a job, this is a volunteer posting. So take that what you will. That's one of the realities about our city. See if I can make this thing work. All right, couple of budgets. On the left, this is the general fund, the one we most think of, $10 million. The biggest chunk of that comes from the property tax that each homeowner, each business, each property in the city pays. When you get your property tax bill in November, I think it's a fun parlor game to go through and notice each of the things we pay for. There's like 24 of them on my bill. 911, ESD, schools, community college, schools local option, schools bond, fire bond gone away. I mean, those kinds of things show up on our property tax. We are very fortunate here in the city to have this little red slice. There's a bunch of cities that would love to have this little red slice. 20% hotel tax. 20% of our general fund is hotel tax. Isn't that nice? Because we're not paying that mostly. We get to charge the visitors. Another big one is what's called franchise fees. Pacific Power has to pay to use our streets for the light poles, et cetera, et cetera. Again, not us paying. We're very happy to share the freight with others. The other, this is all funds, $40 million, 4 times as big as the general fund. You can see the general fund is just a slice of the all funds. We don't pay for this stuff with taxes. We pay for this stuff with fees. The sewer bill. The water fund comes on the sewer bill. We have sewer and water and storm water all together on the same bill. Next time you see it, check it out. There's 3 things you pay each month in the city: storm, sanitary, and water. Road funds is super complicated. We get a bunch of money from the state from gas taxes, and that's, as you know, that's in the tank. But a lot of funding from outside the city comes for that. So the takeaway here is 40 million in all funds, only 10 in the general fund. In the general fund are some of the most famous things about cities: police, general fund; fire, general fund; public works is a lot over here. The council has 6 goals. People say, Mayor, what are the goals? And I say, we have 6, and they're housing, housing, and housing. But we actually have 6, and you're not supposed to be able to read all of these right now, but I'm going to go through each of them very briefly. Equitable and diverse housing inventory. And you can imagine the committee meetings it takes us to all agree, or a majority agree, on this title. You can see some pictures of a very extensive housing strategy report that we created. I'd encourage you to Google it and find it. This is 780 Rand Road, where we're hoping to have 129 affordable housing units. We just scored the last couple $100 million, couple dozen $1 million from the, I'm going to say this wrong, Abigail, private activity bonds and tax credits. How'd I do? Yes. The way you build something like this is you knit together a lot of funding sources, state, federal, local. Put it all together. The Housing Authority does that kind of work. We chipped in the land. Equitable and inclusive community, informed community. We had a civics class, Hood River 101, our first graduating class. and we're chasing a grant to do it again in Spanish. Wouldn't that be nice? For many years, I've been told, soy el único alcalde en el estado de Oregon quien habla español, the only mayor in Oregon who speaks Spanish, which is A, cool, and B, kind of a damn shame. But I've leveraged my ability to speak Spanish as a very good tool to engage all of our residents in what's going on. The Hood River News, remember them? They said that we facilitated the first ever Spanish language testimony at council, which I'm very proud of. We provide a lot of interpretation services. We provide a lot of translation services. The newsletter comes out in both languages. We're working very hard on including everyone in the conversation. Here's an open house we had for the Rand Road project, which, hopefully we'll start digging dirt next summer and will be a major project. Efficient and safe transportation system for walkers, bikers, transit riders, and drivers. I live at the top of the Serpentine at 4th and Montello, and we used to see the bikers come up. Now we see the e-bikers come up, and it's like you have to recalibrate your peripheral vision because they move right along. I was down at Mountain View this week, and Rafe told me half their business is e-bikes now. So what does that mean for our city with all the hills? They really flatten the hills and enable a lot of kinds of transportation flows to happen that didn't used to happen. We put up some barriers by the middle school to do a demonstration project for safe routes to schools. Some of you saw that, better protection for bikes, less parking for cars. We're gonna put part of that back is the next phase of that. We got some outside funding for that. And of course, the most popular question of the season, when's the traffic light gonna open? It looked to me like they were flaming down some of that thermoplastic yellow striping, and it might be open as early as next week. So won't that be nice? Well-maintained and safe community. We got the sanding trucks. Our officers were granted a state award, not for the quantity of DUI stops, but for the quality of the work. They're stopping folks who are successfully, I don't know if the correct word is convicted, but fined. Like the cases don't get thrown out because they did it right. So I'm very proud of that with our staff. And then we bought, for the EMS, chest compression device. It's like a robotic CPR. And the firefighters tell me that this has been a great tool. Environmentally sustainable and resilient community. Those of you who walk the waterfront trail have been seeing a bunch of digging kind of down across from Freem, a little bit past the waterfront park. And every drop of rain has to flow to the Columbia, and there was a sinkhole and somebody screwed up and all that, but it's getting fixed. And the urban renewal tool that we, the city, have used very effectively has been a great tool for fixing the waterfront storm water problem. And we're fixing to do some renewable energy electricity generation in our water line. Flows down from the side of Mount Hood, and there's a bunch of gravity there, and you have to have a pressure relief valve, or you can spin a turbine and make electricity. It's not open yet, but we're moving down the path, and we're very pleased to be having some renewable energy. Adequate parks and open space. One of the confusing things in our community is a bunch of entities do parks. City does parks, county does parks, Port does parks, schools do parks, Parks and Rec does parks, state does parks, National doesn't do parks, but National Forest, like tons of open space, tons of entities operating them. If we were to start again and do it over, we wouldn't do it this way, but you got what you got, and aren't we glad we have all this open space? But a small quantity, our two funnest parks, Jackson and Waterfront. We're really proud about that. I was on council back when the port and the city collaborated to get that waterfront park going. Probably some people in this room were lifting on that shovel. That's a great victory. I'm so pleased that we have it, and it's a great town that it's a real amenity for the folks coming to the river. I'm really pleased about that. None of you should try to read any of these words. The point here is We have a lot of projects. Here's our 6 goals. And specific projects check some different boxes. That first one, the Development Code Audit and Update, don't you want to show up for that meeting, checks all 6 boxes, because how we build affects all of us. I, of course, want to have the best house for me, but my neighbors want to have like street frontage that's decent and habitable and not flood the sewer plant and yada, yada, yada. So all getting along to develop in a way that we can all get along with is super important. We got a fat grant to do all that review, and we're marching through it to make sure that the same great city is here in 5 and 10 and 50 years. These are the list of projects that were started or completed in this fiscal year. Again, nobody should read them all, but I'll call out 3 of them, for example. Heights Streetscape Plan. When the funding emerges, we're going to have a roundabout at the corner of Middle School and Hospital, right there at 13th and May. We got a kind of free firefighter because the state gave us a fire marshal grant. The Lions Club has given us a bunch of stuff to make Man Park nicer. These kinds of things are the things that keep Abigail and her people running from dawn to dusk. And of course, while all of those cool things are happening, that's the 10%. The bottom of the iceberg is, by the way, we have a police department. By the way, we have a fire department. By the way, you gotta plow the roads. By the way, you gotta process an application for a new house. By the way, you gotta mow the grass at the park. So the core services of the city are happening while we, city council, is all excited about, oh, let's do these other great things. It's like, easy, cowboy. We gotta keep doing these things while we're doing it. So some of you have probably been to like Rome or Cusco, are 2 that's come to mind for me, where you're kind of running a museum inside a city or a city inside a museum. It's kind of like you gotta run the city while installing a new traffic light, while reviewing the development code, and keeping that balance is hard work. The staff has to manage up to the council to keep us from instructing them to chase under 7 different rocks. One of the things that I'm pretty proud of, this is my 4th term as mayor, we've done a good job of keeping focus on the fact that one councilor's wish really doesn't matter that much. Go find 3 friends and then you have a quorum, and then it's a policy. So I can't be waltzing in and tell Abigail that, do my pet thing. If we can vote on it and give big scale direction, that's appropriate governance, and I think we're doing a good job. The essential services that I mentioned before, we have like pipes and wires, we have police and fire, we have the planning department and the building department. I do chuckle when I come across the Hood River Bridge and you enter the state of Oregon and it says, building permits required. Like, oh dang, back there it's the Wild West. Like, okay, that's a good idea, building permits. My wife and I were in Mexico sitting on the patio, and we were renovating the house, and she had a book called Basic Wiring Concepts, and she was kind of looking through the book and looking up at the beautiful rental we had on the beach, like, oh, this house is not wired according to like the book, and it's really best if we all wire according to the book, especially if we live close together, right? Back in the way back or out in the way out, you can do things kind of your own way. You can have a septic system. Cities, by definition, are too dense for septic systems. The most common reason someone wants to annex into the city and volunteer to pay extra taxes is because they want sewer, which I just think conceptually is such a fascinating thing. Like, I want to live too close to other people for there to be passive perking of my sewage into the earth. That works when you got 50 acres per person, but density requires sewer. We lived in Ecuador for a while, and I was amazed that even some of these very primitive villages in the Andes, there was alcantarillado, sewer, basic need. A lot of people want to be friends with the mayor, and so I'll be in the coffee shop and somebody will say, oh, Paul, congratulations, I voted for you. And I know that they live on Country Club Road, none of which is in the city of Hood River. It's confusing because our county and our city have the same name. This is not always the way that goes, but Hood River, and even people way out of the city have that on their mailing address. Like, unless you pick it up at the P.O. box in Parkdale, it might be that your address is Hudson Road, Hood River, Oregon. So like, oh, anyway, people get confused about that. We have really quite modest city boundaries. These people do not get to vote for me, do not have to pay taxes for the city. These people, this narrow slice is what's called the urban growth boundary. It's the area that the state says we may expand into, but we haven't yet. For a while, this area kind of like here, there was some bad policy being made that I and others, but I helped stop, which is connecting to sewer without annexation. This was bad policy for the city, and we were able to put a stop to it, and not everyone thought that was a good idea, but now we can grow in a more sustainable way. Also on that bad policy is Stonegate. Those folks have sewer, those folks aren't in the city. That's not the way that should be. So this is our modest-sized city, and interestingly, look what's in the city. Big chunk of river, but look what's not in the city, the sandbar. So I did have a constituent come recently and say that it used to feel safer walking his dog on the sandbar, but now it's really kind of a forest, right? The scrub stuff has grown up high enough that that limited visibility made him really feel kind of different about it, which I appreciate that. I mean, that is a quite policed, is that the right word? Like, nobody's down there doing public safety. We're all getting along, right? Until we aren't. So that's an area that happened overnight. Who was here for that? We all were back in 2006. Not in the city, but all this is in the city, and that has regulatory implications for our workload. So I'm not going to take questions, but I do have Pie with the Mayor. Who's been to Pie with the Mayor? Everyone's invited to Pie with the Mayor. We do have an email sign up so you can get the periodic updates from staff. And we do print out a newsletter that I see in a lot of places. El Cuate, I see it. One Community Health, I see it. Like, look for my smiling face on the cover, and you can learn as much about the city as one. And as I said, we have this little guy here has more than perhaps any of us wants to know about the city. You guys deserve big kudos for being a civic, active organization, which is why I come and speak here, because I get a lot of ears and eyeballs in one room. You guys are a pillar of this community, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Onward. Thank you.